नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस जी।
किसने नाम चेंज किया इसका?
या मतलब नरेंद्र मोदी जी जब आए थे पोर्ट पर।
क्यों नाम चेंज किया आपको मालूम है? मोदी जी ने नाम क्यों चेंज किया आपको मालूम है?
सही बात है, चेंज किया तो अच्छा ही किया क्योंकि अंग्रेज के नाम से थे।
हाँ, फिर भी वो तो हमारा हिस्ट्री था ना।
The badge hanging from their necks released a melodious jingle, but it reached their ears like a sarcastic sneer. Usually on the metal piece, the imprisonment period and the crime that had brought the convict into the cellular jail and the prisoner number were engraved. But the creative jailer had found an ingenious way to demoralize the political prisoners. Only one letter was engraved on the triangular metal piece that hung from the political prisoner's neck. It was D. D stood for Despicable Lot, Dangerous Prisoners, and the self-proclaimed god of Cellular Jail and Port Blair. But for prisoners, he was more of a walking devil. Whenever any strength left to joke with battered bodies, they used to whisper that the Scotsman looked more human in sleep. David Barry used to say things like, "Remember, you scum of the society? Since 1857 mutiny, many political convicts, rebels, and extremists had been sent to Andaman. And by the grace of the Almighty, none of them had gone back to mainland India alive so far. So what is the point in mentioning period of imprisonment on the badge of these extremists?" With a sweeping glance, he would try to gauge whether his statement instilled complete hopelessness and fear in prisoners' eyes. Prisoner Sushil Dasgupta's son, who later described the treacherous treatment and soul-destroying slave work his father was forced to endure during his incarceration, mentioned that after 6 hours of torturous work under the fierce Indian sun in Cellular Jail, Sushil Dasgupta's hands were covered in his own blood. His body exhausted from the relentless and monotonous motion of pounding rocks and coconuts to produce a backbreaking quota of fiber. His throat was bone dry. He stopped to ask the guard on duty for a cup of water, but instead the overseer raised his whip, bringing it down over and over with a torrent of abuse.
हिस्टोरिकल प्लेस का आइलैंड है ये। यहाँ अंग्रेज ने क्या क्या बना रखे वो आपको दिखाते हुए बताते हुए लेके जाए।
ठीक है।
ये देखिए लेफ्ट साइड में जो दिख रहा है ये थे प्रिंटिंग प्रेस, ये उस समय के था अंग्रेजों के। उसके बगल देखिए आप पावर हाउस जो बिजली गिरते, उसके पीछे है एक स्विमिंग पूल।
स्विमिंग पूल?
हाँ जी, उस समय का स्विमिंग पूल। ये थे उस समय का बेकरी हुआ करते। आज के डेट में राइट साइड देखिए चेयर लगा हुआ है, इधर बैठा के शो दिखाते हैं लाइट एंड साउंड।
यहाँ पे भी लाइट एंड साउंड शो होता है?
हाँ।
मतलब वो सेम शो जो सेलुलर जेल में दिखाते हैं वही?
हाँ। नहीं, ये ऑडियो
ऑडियो होता है यहाँ पे?
हाँ, वीडियो। उस समय का टेनिस कोर्ट हुआ करते
यहाँ पे?
हाँ जी।
रॉस में कैपिटल था?
जी जी।
Ross Island. It was the British equivalent to the Soviet gulags and the Nazi death camps. For Indian dissidents and mutineers who tried to revolt the British colonial rule, Ross was a death knell. Everything from torture, forced labor to medical experimentation on humans took place here. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, the Andaman Islands were perfectly suited for a penal colony where the empire's enemies could be sent to exile. It was in 1856, 1 year before the Indian mutiny would break the back of British East India Company and eventually dissolving it. Plans were drawn for a convict establishment in this island. According to ancient Hindu scriptures, journey across the sea was a social taboo that resulted in loss of one's respectability, which British noted as a rather bizarre belief that prevented many Indian traders from participating in maritime trade those days. But Hindus those days staunchly believed that crossing the ocean entailed the end of reincarnation cycle, as the traveler would be cut off from the degenerating water of holy Ganges. It's interesting to note that in Rig Veda, which is considered as the first book of knowledge used by a civilized society, it is replete with Vedic hymns that produce irrefutable evidence that Vedic Aryans were experts in the construction of seafaring vessels, and marine trade was very common in those days. The Vedic people regarded sea, in fact, as a repository of knowledge, or Samudra Lakshmi, and a flourishing maritime trade existed between India and other foreign countries. Internationally famous Sanskrit scholar, I think Dr. V. Raghavan, in his book An Anthology on Aspects of Indian Culture, says that in ancient days, Indians went out by both land routes as well as by sea routes. And from the evidence of early sculpture and literature, it was very clear that they have been a vigorously shipbuilding and seafaring people. According to Aristotle's music pupil, Indian philosophers were seen in Athens interviewing Socrates. Voyages to Alexandria were most common in India, and there were Indians living in Alexandria in the 1st century of the Christian era. And yet sometime in the 19th century and in the early part of 20th century, a myth started gaining ground that if a Brahmin crosses the sea somehow and goes overseas, he becomes polluted, and that on his return, he should undergo some kind of purification ceremony, or what is known as prayashchit in Sanskrit, to get purified and returned to the society. Can't help but recall here that after the return from the West, Swami Vivekananda, who carried the message of Sanatan Dharma to the West and was highly applauded for it, was not allowed entry to Puri Jagannath temple because the priest held that he had ceased to be a Hindu Brahmin after crossing the black water, which is called as Kala Pani. However, Lokmanya Tilak in his own Marathi newspaper mentioned that how such foolish myths actually resulted in India's downfall. But those two words, Kalapani, was dreaded for another reason too, and the reason is right here. The British hoped that these words would instill fear among all the Hindus across the empire, and that's why British wanted transoceanic travel for the convicts. According to the British Field Marshal Robert Cornelius Napier, this entitled actually completely, a complete separation from every tie, relationship, possession that a man holds dear to their heart. And incarceration in the jail, they hope to threaten convicts with a complete loss of caste, resulting in social exclusion post-release if such possibility occurs at the first place.
इसमें होते थे ताश रूम, बार रूम, डांस रूम सब हुआ करते थे, सबऑर्डिनेट क्लब थे।
यहाँ पे सेक्रेटरीट था।
हाँ जी, सब खंडर हो गया। वर्ल्ड वार में
यहाँ पे ओके, वर्ल्ड वार में खंडर हो गया।
हाँ जी।
तो इसका कुछ मेंटेनेंस वगैरह कुछ नहीं है? अंडमान अथॉरिटी इसका कोई प्रिजर्वेशन नहीं करता क्या?
ये आइलैंड पूरा अभी नेवी कंट्रोल में है।
ये नेवी कंट्रोल में है। अच्छा,
2-3 लोग वैसा।
तो यहाँ पे कोई हॉस्पिटल, स्कूल वगैरह कुछ है?
नहीं, वैसा कुछ नहीं है, पहले का जो था वही।
तो अगर रात को रहता है, किसी को सडनली इमरजेंसी जरूरत पड़ा तो क्या करेंगे?
यहाँ बोट रहते हैं इमरजेंसी।
अच्छा।
और ये लेफ्ट साइड में देखिए, ये थे आरसी चर्च, उस समय का रोमन कैथोलिक चर्च। आज के डेट में पावर हाउस बना दिया गया। ये आइलैंड के लिए अभी पावर सप्लाई यहीं से।
रात को पावर रहता है?
हाँ जी। और ये लेफ्ट साइड में देखिए, ये थे ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स के मेस रूम थे, किचन थे।
उसका किचन था।
हाँ जी, सोल्जर्स के।
तो वो जो एक्साइल में जो फ्रीडम फाइटर्स को रखा गया था, सावरकर, उल्लासकर जी, उन लोगों को क्या बस वो सेलुलर जेल में रखते थे या कभी रॉस में भी ले आए?
नहीं, उनको क्या है, दिन में यहाँ लाते थे, जो भी काम वाम वगैरह जो है सारा चीज यही कराते थे। उसके बाद में यहाँ से शाम को फिर लेके जो भी।
तो उन लोगों को यहाँ से, अच्छा, उन लोगों को यहाँ से मतलब जो काम कराते थे टॉर्चर करके फिर ले आते थे।
और ये लेफ्ट साइड में देखिए, राइट साइड में देखिए।
What left her right side? Indian politics then was neither left nor right, but a national consciousness had been shaped by what the British saw as a mutiny in 1857, following which India was put under the British crown. Technically, Andaman and Nicobar Islands became the first territory to be liberated from the British by flying the Indian tricolour, along with Tamluk and Kontai divisions of Midnapur in West Bengal, who actually got independence from the British twice, once in the aftermath of the Quit India movement and again on 15th August. On Republic Day, it's a free entry at Ross Island for islanders and school students, and usually 21-gun salute gets fired from here in the memory of martyrs. While some people like my guide in Ross believe that it was better to remove British influence from the name, who could remove these imprints of absolute horror? you visit Ross if you are not interested in historical ruins? Well, you can still enjoy a glorious view of the bay, and the journey is enjoyable with chances of spotting bottlenose dolphin. If your starting point is Jungleghat jetty like mine, you will make more space for that, but travel time will be much more. So listen to your gut. You can also get to spot dolphins if you are traveling from Aberdeen jetty. For me, the highlight of this trip was my first dolphin sighting in Andaman, and for the first time, I saw train rattling in wild, which is the magical sight of display of full peacock feathers. I have shared those moments in this video. However, Ross will not let one forget the phantom of chopped limbs and grave wrongs of yesterday just because we want to be impressed by the serenity of today. While planning my trip, I also thought once, do I need to experience anything bittersweet in travel? Reading a bit about the blood-ravaged history of Andaman Islands before my trip made me disturbed at the extent of imperial torture and subjugation that has taken place on this land not too long ago. The kind of sacrifice, resolve, and determination shown by our freedom fighters stirred me for the first time. Clearly, school-level history books didn't do a good job there.
ये क्या था?
ये सोल्जर्स बैरक थे, ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स बैरक. इसमें रहते थे 165 सोल्जर्स.
ये सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर के टाइम में या उससे पहले?
पूरा ये आइलैंड पूरा सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर में ही सारा डैमेज. और ये सुनामी के टाइम में भी ये आइलैंड जो है बहुत बचाव किया है पोर्ट ब्लेयर को.
सुनामी
2004 में जब
मतलब
सुनामी आया था
हाँ, हाँ.
उस समय.
वो दिसंबर का सुनामी राइट?
हाँ जी 26 दिसंबर.
It is a stump now. Its art gone, its ornaments all gone. It does not start with spring, nor bend like a bow when grain, nor from its flowers fly Kamadeva's arrows, nor in its shade are sighs of travelers heard or tears of lovers seen. Only one old bird sits remembering something. As the ghost of past danced with tantalizing melancholy in front of eyes amidst the crumbling ruins of Ross, Stump, Vikram Shet's translation of Shuriya Country at his original Nirala poem came into my mind. Not even 2 kilometers across two different clubhouses, one for officers and the other for subordinates, Governor General's mansion, a secretariat, a printing press, a church, water treatment plant, an artillery, a cemetery, a swimming pool, a hospital, stables, tennis courts, ballrooms with Burma teak and Italian tiles, spring-mounted dance floors are all in front, yet no excess or extravagance is left to awestruck anymore. Wandering across the giant knots of ficus tree roads, a TripAdvisor review I read before the travel along with Dostoevsky picked. The world says you have needs, satisfy them. You have as much right as the rich and the mighty. Don't hesitate to satisfy your needs. Indeed, expand your needs and demand more. This is the worldly doctrine of today, and they believe that this is freedom. The result for the rich is isolation and suicide, for the poor, envy and murder. On the one hand, you can almost visualize neighing horses and swirling of carriage wheels. On the other, the Bollywood bug in mind thinks about Tin Guna Lagan Dena Parega in a strange voice. The development work here began in 1858 and about 200 Indian freedom fighters were forced to build this township to support the lavish lifestyle of British Raj when British Dr. James Pattinson Walker arrived at the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago and established the penal colony in the smallest of the 572 islands that form this archipelago.
आप सबके सामने बड़े गर्व के साथ उस घोषणा को करने जा रहा हूं. अब से रॉस द्वीप को नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस द्वीप से जाना जाएगा.
Ross Island was an unlikely seat of power, yet chosen as the colony's administrative headquarters as its strategic location provided safety from the attackers. Thus began an era of unprecedented penal cruelty on Indian soil. Nilima Valangi, a national award-winning photographer and well-published travel writer, wrote in her article that for years, the inmates were forced and bullied to clear the island's impenetrable humid forest to make way for an opulent colonial complex. They constructed everything from a luxurious commissioner's bungalow with curved gables and shaded verandas to a Presbyterian church fitted with stained glass window panels from Italy. Ross Island's colonial masters could entertain themselves in manicured gardens, tennis courts, and swimming pools, and in fact, no expense was spared in making Ross a comfortable haven. Life on Ross wasn't all hunky-dory though, noted Aparna Vaidik, a professor of history at India's Ashoka University. Residents felt isolated and bored, and the posting was seen as a punishment by most officials. They particularly faced challenge as their skin was allergic to the seawater in this area. While those of Indian origins didn't face any such concern, after many instances of death, British created a water distillation plant here. Indians had several other things to dread though apart from the wretched treatment. Many prisoners here died due to malaria, dengue and other tropical diseases. The British even conducted illicit medical trials to treat malaria with an experimental drug. Thousands of convicts were force-fed cinchona alkaloid, an unprocessed drug that would later be distilled into quinine, imparting severe side effects that include nausea and depression. Interestingly, quinine is still used to treat malaria today.
जापानीज बैंकर था
1941's devastating earthquake of magnitude 8.1 totally ruined the settlement, and British had to move their capital to Port Blair. But the saga of torment didn't stop with that. Japanese captured this island during Second World War, and after invading Andaman in 1942, they pillaged it for raw material and built a few bunkers to protect their conquest. Allied forces recaptured the islands in 1945, and soon after, the entire penal colony was permanently disbanded. While the occupation lasted about 3.5 years, this remains as a controversial period that still elicits mixed response from the locals, since Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose was given the nominal charge of the administration by the Japanese. He had set up the Arzi Hukumate Azad Hind, that is Provisional Government of Free India, and later on a visit to the islands renamed them Shahid and Swaraj, but essentially the control had remained firmly in the hands of the Japanese occupiers. Netaji stayed for only one day in December 1943 in Ross. The Homfregans massacre on 30th January 1944, entailing the cold-blooded shooting of 44 Indians suspected of spying, personified the helplessness of the Azad Hind administration as the Japanese whimsically butchered members of its own supposed ally. That's why many locals believe that Ross should have never been renamed after Netaji, as Japanese unleashed a reign of unprecedented terror right under his nose, and he couldn't do anything since he befriended them to defeat the British. Above the appalling ruin, in bleak light of your stormy eye, magic takes flight like a daunted witch, quitting castle when real days break. Fractured pillars frame prospects of rock while you stand heroic in coat and tie. I sit, composed in Grecian tunic and Psyche knot, rooted to your black look, the play turned tragic. With such blight wrought on your bankrupt estate, what ceremony of words can patch the havoc?